The October wind came off the Pacific like a warning, carrying salt and the smell of cold asphalt through the cracked window of Rosie's bar. Luciana Martinez wiped down the mahogany counter for the third time that hour, her movements mechanical, practiced. The bar sat on a forgotten stretch of Ventura Avenue, wedged between a shuttered auto shop and a laundromat that flickered its neon sign like a dying heartbeat. This wasn't the scenic Ventura tourists saw in postcards. No palm-lined promenade, no surfers catching golden hour waves. This was the Ventura that locals knew, gritty, honest, and unforgiving. She glanced at the clock above the rows of whiskey bottles. 9:30. Rosie had called her 4 hours ago, voice tight with something that might have been fear or just exhaustion. "I need you tonight, Lucy. Private party. The club's renting out the whole place." Luciana had felt her stomach drop. Which club? The pause on the other end told her everything. The Iron Serpents Charter. They're celebrating something. "I don't ask questions. You know that." She did know. Rosie's bar had always walked a careful line, neutral territory in a county where motorcycle clubs carved up influence like territories on a war map. The Iron Serpents, an affiliate chapter of the Hells Angels, had been fixtures in Ventura for 30 years. They paid well, caused minimal trouble when respected, and expected absolute discretion. Luciana had worked at Rosie's for 3 years and had developed one simple rule: keep your head down, serve the drinks, and never, ever get involved. Now standing behind the bar as leather-clad men filtered through the entrance, she reminded herself of that rule. The bikers moved with a particular kind of confidence, not the loud bravado of weekend warriors, but the quiet certainty of men who'd earned their place through blood and loyalty. They wore their cuts with pride, black leather vests adorned with patches that told stories only they fully understood. The Hells Angels Death Head logo dominated the back, while smaller patches marked rank, achievements, and affiliations. Luciana poured bourbon, opened beers, and kept her eyes on her work. The air grew thick with cigarette smoke and the rumble of conversation punctuated by bursts of laughter. The jukebox in the corner played Lynyrd Skynyrd, then AC/DC, then Old Willie Nelson, the soundtrack of men who lived by their own code. "Whiskey, neat. Make it a double." She looked up. The man before her was younger than most in the room, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds over the channel. He wore his cut like a second skin, and the patches on his chest told her he wasn't just a member. He was someone who mattered. The sergeant-at-arms rocker beneath the club's name confirmed it. "Coming up," she said, reaching for the maker's mark. "The good stuff," he added, nodding toward the top shelf where a bottle of Blanton's sat. His voice was low, controlled, with a gravel texture that suggested too many cigarettes or too many nights shouting over engine roar. Luciana grabbed the bottle and poured carefully, feeling his gaze on her hands. She slid the glass across the bar, meeting his eyes for just a second, long enough to be respectful, not long enough to invite anything. $8, she said. He laid down a 20 and didn't ask for change. "You're new. I've been here 3 years. New to me." He picked up the glass but didn't drink, just held it, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "I'm Cole Maddox. You got a name, or should I keep calling you bartender all night?" "Luciana." She turned to serve another customer, but she could feel him still watching, still waiting. The night deepened. More members arrived, and the energy in the room shifted, became more intense, more focused. Luciana learned to read the hierarchy by watching who deferred to whom, who spoke freely, and who waited for permission. Cole Maddox, she noticed, rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. He moved through the crowd like a wolf among dogs, respected and given space. Around 11, a younger biker, barely legal drinking age with fresh patches and nervous energy, leaned too far over the bar, his breath reeking of beer and bravado. "You got a boyfriend, sweetheart?" Luciana didn't look up from the glass she was filling. "I've got a job. That's all you need to know. Come on. Just making conversation." She said no, prospect. Cole's voice cut through the noise without rising in volume. He hadn't moved from his position near the pool table, but his words carried absolute authority. "Get your beer and step back." The younger man flushed but obeyed immediately, muttering an apology as he retreated. Luciana felt a flicker of something she didn't want to name, gratitude mixed with wariness. She didn't need protection, but she also knew better than to refuse it when it came from someone like Cole Maddox. The fight started at midnight. Luciana was pulling a draft when she heard the crash. A chair hitting the floor, then shouts. Two members squared off near the back corner, their argument escalating from words to shoves in seconds. The crowd didn't scatter. Instead, it formed a loose circle, some members trying to separate the combatants, others just watching with the detached interest of men who'd seen this play out countless times. She stayed behind the bar, hands flat on the wood, heart rate climbing. Bar fights weren't uncommon, but this felt different, more volatile, less controlled. One of the fighters, a broad-shouldered man with graying temples, threw a wild punch that connected with a crack she felt in her chest. The other man, younger and faster, responded with a tackle that sent them both crashing into a table perilously close to the bar. The table collapsed, glasses shattered. The fight was now 3 feet from where Luciana stood. She started to move backward, but the crowd had shifted, blocking her exit. The fighters grappled, their struggle chaotic and dangerous, rolling toward the bar with no awareness of anything but each other. A stray elbow knocked over a bottle of vodka, sending it spinning toward the edge of the counter. Then Cole was there. He moved fast, faster than a man his size should be able to move. One moment he was across the room. The next he was in front of her, his hands on her shoulders pulling her away from the bar just as one of the fighters crashed into the spot where she'd been standing. The impact sent more bottles flying, and the sharp smell of spilled alcohol mixed with the smoke and sweat in the air. "I've got you," Cole said, his voice low and steady in her ear. "I'll just hold you. Stay still." His arms went around her, not aggressive, not confining, just protective. One hand pressed against the small of her back. The other cradled the back of her head, keeping her face turned away from the fight. He angled his body so that he was between her and the chaos, a wall of leather and muscle that absorbed the crowd's jostling without moving. Luciana's first instinct was to push away, to insist she could handle herself, but the press of bodies around them was too tight, the danger too real. So she stayed still, her hands coming up instinctively to rest against his chest, and that's when she felt it, his heartbeat. It was racing, hard, fast, pounding against her palm like it was trying to break free from his ribcage. The contrast between that frantic rhythm and his steady grip, his controlled breathing, was jarring. He held her like it was nothing, like this was just another situation to manage, but his heart told a completely different story. She tilted her head back slightly, enough to see his face. His jaw was set, his eyes focused somewhere over her head, tracking the fight. But there was tension in the corners of his eyes, in the way his throat worked when he swallowed, and when her fingers shifted slightly against his chest, just a reflex, nothing intentional, she felt his breath catch. The moment stretched. The fight continued somewhere behind him. She could hear the scuffling, the shouts, the heavy footfalls of men trying to restore order, but all of that seemed distant, muted, compared to the feeling of Cole's arms around her and the betraying thunder of his heart against her hand. "You okay?" His voice was rough, and he still wasn't looking at her. "Yeah." Her own voice sounded strange, too quiet. "Yeah, I'm fine. Good." But he didn't let go. Not yet. Not until the sounds of the fight diminished, replaced by angry muttering and the scrape of broken furniture being moved. Only then did his arms loosen, giving her space to step back. Luciana did immediately, putting distance between them. Her hands felt cold where they'd been touching him. She smoothed down her black t-shirt, tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, anything to have something to do with her hands that wasn't thinking about the heat of his skin through fabric. "Thanks," she managed. "For the... yeah, thanks." Cole nodded once. His expression had returned to that neutral mask he seemed to wear like armor, but when he turned to help deal with the aftermath of the fight, she saw his hands, noticed the way they flexed, opened and closed like he was trying to shake off the feeling of having held her. The fighters were separated, the older one escorted outside to cool off, the younger one given a harsh talking to by a member who appeared to be an officer. Cole spoke briefly to the man who seemed to be running the gathering, the president based on the patch, and then helped right the overturned furniture. The bar slowly returned to a semblance of order. Rosie emerged from the back office where she'd retreated when things got heated. "Everyone good?" Her eyes found Luciana, asking a second question without words. "We're fine," Luciana assured her. "Just some broken glass and spilled drinks. Nothing that won't clean up." But as she swept up the shattered remains of bottles and glasses, she kept replaying those seconds in Cole's arms. The way he'd moved without hesitation, the firmness of his grip, the absolute control of his body, and the complete lack of control in his heartbeat. It meant something, that contrast. She just wasn't sure what. The rest of the night passed in a strange fog. The bikers stayed until 2 in the morning, drinking more quietly now, the earlier violence having burned off whatever tension had been building. Cole returned to the bar once to refill his whiskey, and this time when he looked at her, there was something different in his eyes. A question, maybe, or an acknowledgement of what had passed between them. "You handled that well," he said, laying down another 20. "A lot of people freeze up." "I've worked bars for a long time," Luciano replied, pouring his drink. "Takes more than a couple drunk guys to rattle me." "That's not what I meant." He picked up the glass, but before he walked away, he added, "You're steady. That's rare." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. He returned to his group and she returned to her work, but she felt the weight of his words, the way they seemed to carry more meaning than the surface suggested. When the club finally filtered out into the cold Ventura night, engines roaring to life one by one, Luciana stood at the door with Rosie, watching the taillights disappear down the avenue. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the promise of rain from the marine layer that crept inland after midnight. "You did good tonight," Rosie said, locking the door. "I know that's not your favorite crowd." "It's fine." Luciana grabbed her jacket from behind the bar. "Money's money." Still, Rosie studied her with eyes that had seen too much of life to miss anything important. "That Maddox guy, he's got a reputation. Not bad, just intense. Word is he's been with the club since he was 20. Earned his patch the hard way." Luciana shrugged, trying for casual. "He seemed okay. Stopped that fight from getting worse." "Yeah, well, just be careful." Rosie started counting the till. "Men like that, they're complicated. And you've always been smart about keeping things simple." "Always," Luciana agreed. But as she walked to her car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic that had seen better decades, she couldn't stop thinking about the feeling of Cole's heartbeat against her palm, the way it had raced and stuttered and given away everything his face refused to show. She drove home through empty streets, past the sleeping storefronts and the occasional streetlight that still worked. Her apartment was in a complex near the Ventura River bottom, not fancy but clean, with a view of the mountains if she stood on her balcony and looked east. She'd lived there alone for 5 years, ever since she'd left a relationship that had taught her the value of independence and the danger of trusting the wrong person. Inside, she locked the door, kicked off her shoes, and stood in the dark for a long moment, just breathing. Her black work shirt smelled like cigarette smoke and spilled beer. Her feet ached, but all she could think about was the way Cole had said, "I'll just hold you," like it was a promise. A simple, protective gesture, except nothing about it had felt simple. His heartbeat had told her the truth. Whatever was happening between them, whatever had sparked to life in those few seconds, it was anything but simple. And the most dangerous part wasn't that she'd felt it. The most dangerous part was that she wanted to feel it again. Luciana poured herself a glass of water and stood at her kitchen window, looking out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, Cole Maddox was probably sitting in a clubhouse or a garage, surrounded by his brothers, living a life she'd promised herself she'd never touch. Men like him brought chaos, brought danger, brought complications she couldn't afford, but his heart had been racing. For her, because of her. And that truth, unwanted and undeniable, followed her into restless sleep. The morning came too early, pale November light filtering through thin curtains and painting Luciana's bedroom in shades of gray. She'd slept poorly, her dreams tangled with the sensation of hands on her back and a heartbeat that wouldn't slow. Now sitting at her small kitchen table with bitter coffee and the local news playing low on her phone, she tried to convince herself that last night had been nothing, just adrenaline, just circumstance. It didn't work. Ventura woke up slowly on Sunday mornings, the tourist families sleeping in at beachside hotels, the locals nursing hangovers or heading to church or paddling out into the lineup at C Street. Luciana had the day off from her other job. She worked mornings at a coffee shop on Main Street, serving lattes to college students and business people, so she spent the afternoon doing deliberately normal things: laundry, groceries at the Vons on Thompson, a run along the bike path that hugged the coast, her breath coming hard as she pushed herself up the hills near Surfer's Point. But her mind kept returning to Rosie's bar, to Cole Maddox, to the question of whether she'd see him again. She got her answer Monday night. Rosie had called her in for another shift, this time a regular one. No private parties, just the usual crowd of locals and the occasional biker passing through. Luciana arrived at 6, tied on her apron, and started her routine. The bar was quieter early in the week and she appreciated the breathing room, the ability to think without constant demands on her attention. At 7:30, the door opened, and Cole walked in. He was alone this time, no cut, just a plain black t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. Without the leather vest, he looked younger, less intimidating, but no less dangerous. He moved to the bar with that same controlled grace, and when he sat down on the stool directly in front of where she was working, Luciana felt her pulse kick up. "Whiskey?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "Beer tonight. Whatever's cold." She pulled a Pacifico from the cooler, popped the cap and slid it across to him. He took a long drink, his throat working, and she found herself watching the movement before she caught herself and looked away. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon," she said, wiping down a glass that was already clean. "I live here. Ventura, I mean." He set the bottle down, fingers drumming once against the label before going still. "Grew up in Oxnard. Been in Ventura proper for about 10 years now. This is my local. I've worked here 3 years. Never seen you except when the club rents the place. I don't usually come in when I'm off the clock." He met her eyes, and there was something searching in his gaze, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. "But I was passing by. Thought I'd stop in." Luciana knew a lie when she heard one. Not because it was poorly told, but because of what it wasn't saying. Men like Cole didn't just pass by places. They moved with purpose, with intention. But she didn't call him on it. Instead, she just nodded and moved to serve another customer, an older regular who wanted his usual rum and coke. When she returned to Cole's end of the bar, he was still there, still nursing that same beer. "Look," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "About Saturday night." "You don't have to explain anything." Luciana kept her hands busy, organizing bottles, anything to avoid looking directly at him. "You stopped a situation from getting worse. I appreciated it, that's all." "That's all?" There was something in his tone. Not quite amusement, not quite frustration. What else would it be? He was quiet for a moment, and when she finally risked a glance at him, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Finally, he said, "You felt it." Not a question. A statement. Luciana's hand stilled on the bottle she'd been pretending to arrange. "Felt what?" "Don't play stupid. You're not stupid." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the bar, and the space between them suddenly felt very small. "My heart. You felt it, and you know what it meant." The directness of it caught her off guard. She'd expected denial, deflection, not this blunt acknowledgement of what had passed between them. For a second she considered lying, brushing it off. But something about the way he was looking at her, patient and unflinching, made her answer with truth instead. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I felt it, and nothing. You got caught up in a moment. Adrenaline does that to people." "Is that what you think this is?" He shook his head slowly. "Adrenaline. What else would it be?" she repeated, but this time her voice wasn't quite as steady. Cole took another drink of his beer, set it down with deliberate care, and stood. For a heart-stopping second she thought he was going to leave, but instead he just moved closer to the bar, close enough that she could smell leather and smoke, and something underneath that was just him, clean and masculine and entirely too appealing. "I've been trying to figure out how to stay away from this place," he said, his voice pitched low, intimate. "Told myself you were just a bartender. Pretty sure. But there's a lot of pretty women in Ventura. Told myself that what I felt Saturday was exactly what you said. Adrenaline, the fight. Just protecting someone who was in the wrong place. I almost believed it. What changed? I couldn't stop thinking about it." His eyes held hers, storm gray and uncompromising. "About the way you fit against me. The way you didn't panic, didn't fall apart. You just stayed steady. About how it felt when you touched my chest, like you were reaching inside and grabbing hold of something I keep locked down." Luciana swallowed hard. "Cole, I'm not asking you for anything," he interrupted. "I'm not even sure what I want, but I'm not going to lie about what's happening here. There's something between us, and pretending there isn't doesn't make it go away." Before she could respond, another customer called for service and the moment broke. Cole stepped back, picked up his beer, and moved to a table in the corner. But for the rest of her shift, she felt his presence like a physical weight, always aware of exactly where he was in the room. He stayed until closing, nursing 2 more beers over the course of 3 hours, sometimes scrolling through his phone, sometimes just watching the other patrons. But every time Luciana looked his way, she found his eyes on her, and each time their gazes met, something tightened in her chest. When the last customers finally left and Rosie locked the door, Cole stood and brought his empty bottle to the bar. "Need help cleaning up?" he asked. "We've got it," Rosie answered before Luciana could speak. The older woman's sharp eyes moved between them, reading the situation with the instinct of someone who'd been managing bars and people for 30 years. "But thanks for offering." Cole nodded, then looked at Luciana. "Walk you to your car?" "I'm fine." "I know you are. I'm still asking." Rosie made a small sound that might have been approval or concern, then disappeared into the back office with a pointed, "I'll finish the cash out. Take your time, Lucy," which left Luciana with no good excuse to refuse. 5 minutes later, they stepped out into the Ventura night. The temperature had dropped, November asserting itself with cold wind off the ocean and the smell of coming rain. Luciana pulled her jacket tighter and started toward her Civic, parked under a streetlight that flickered like it was considering giving up entirely. Cole walked beside her, hands in his pockets, not touching but close enough that she felt the heat radiating from him. "You don't have to do this," she said when they reached her car. "I've been walking to my car by myself for 3 years." "I know." He stopped a respectful distance away, giving her space. "Humor me." "Why?" "Because." He seemed to struggle with the words like he wasn't used to explaining himself. "Because I can't seem to stay away, and if I can't stay away, the least I can do is make sure you get home safe." Luciana unlocked her car but didn't get in. Instead, she turned to face him fully, tired of the dance they were doing. "What do you want from me, Cole?" "Honestly, I don't know." He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration clear in the gesture. "I'm not good at this. Relationships, feelings, that's not my world. My world is the club, the brothers, the code we live by. Simple, clear. But this," he gestured between them, "this isn't simple." "No," she agreed. "It's not. And that's exactly why we should stop whatever this is before it starts." "You're probably right." But he didn't move away. Instead, he took a half step closer, and suddenly the space between them was charged, electric. "You want to know what I thought about all day today?" She should say no, should get in her car and drive away. But instead she heard herself whisper, "What?" "The way you looked at me Saturday night. After the fight, when I let you go, you looked at me like you wanted me to pull you back. Like maybe you felt it too, that thing that doesn't make sense but won't go away." His voice dropped even lower. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I imagined it." Luciana's breath came shorter. She was trapped between the car door and Cole's presence, and part of her, the smart part that had kept her safe and uninvolved for years, screamed at her to lie, to push him away, to end this before it became something she couldn't control. But she'd never been good at lying to herself. "You didn't imagine it," she admitted, the words costing her something. "But that doesn't mean we should do anything about it. You said it yourself. Your world is the club. My world is staying as far from that life as possible. We're a bad idea. Probably the worst." He smiled then, just a slight curve of his mouth, but it transformed his face, made him look less dangerous and more human. "But I've made worse decisions." Despite herself, Luciana felt an answering smile pull at her own lips. "That's not exactly reassuring." "I'm not trying to reassure you." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers barely grazed her cheek, but the touch sent heat racing through her. "I'm just being honest. I want to know you. I want to figure out why my heart won't slow down when you're around. And yeah, maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe we're from different worlds, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel." His hand dropped away, but the sensation of his touch lingered. Luciana's heart was pounding now, and she knew if he touched her again, really touched her like he had Saturday night, she might not have the strength to walk away. "I need to think," she said finally. It's a lot. Take all the time you need." He stepped back, giving her room. "I'll be here. At the bar, in Ventura, wherever. And if you decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll respect that. But if you decide you want to see where this goes..." He paused, his eyes holding hers. "I promise you won't regret it." Before she could respond, before she could second-guess herself into either running away or running toward him, Cole turned and walked back toward the bar. She watched him climb onto a black Harley she hadn't noticed parked in the shadows, watched him kick it to life with a roar that split the quiet night. He didn't look back as he pulled out onto Ventura Avenue, but she stood there long after his taillights disappeared, her hand pressed to her chest where her own heartbeat hammered against her ribs. The drive home was a blur. Luciana barely remembered the turns, the stoplights, the familiar landmarks. Her mind was full of Cole's voice, Cole's words, Cole's goddamn heartbeat that had betrayed him so completely. She wanted him. That was the truth she'd been avoiding since Saturday night. Wanted him in a way that scared her, that felt too big and too complicated and too dangerous. But she also wanted safety, wanted simplicity, wanted the life she'd carefully built, one that didn't include outlaw bikers and the chaos they brought with them. In her apartment, she stood at the window again, staring out at the dark shapes of the mountains against the starlit sky. Somewhere out there, Cole was probably back at the clubhouse or in his own place, dealing with his own thoughts. Did he feel this same pull, this same dangerous temptation? His heartbeat said yes. His words said yes. Everything about the way he'd looked at her, touched her, stood close enough to feel but far enough to give her choice. All of it said yes. Luciana pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. She was in trouble. Deep, complicated, beautiful trouble. And the worst part was, she wasn't sure she wanted to find her way out. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Cole came to Rosie's bar 3 more times, always alone, always staying for a few hours before disappearing back into whatever life he led outside those walls. He never pushed, never demanded, just existed in her space, a constant presence that both comforted and unnerved her. Luciana found herself learning his patterns. He drank beer on weeknights, whiskey on weekends. He was quieter on Mondays, more relaxed by Thursdays. He watched the door when people came in, a habit so ingrained he probably didn't realize he did it. And he always positioned himself where he could see her working, could track her movements through the bar with eyes that missed nothing. He's always where the danger isn't, Rosie observed one night after Cole had left. They were closing up, and the older woman had been watching Luciana watch the door. Near you, between you and anyone who might cause problems. You noticed that? Luciana had noticed. A week earlier, a drunk patron had gotten aggressive over his tab, and before she could even call for help, Cole had been there, not threatening, not violent, just present in a way that made the drunk man suddenly remember he had somewhere else to be. 2 nights ago, a glass had shattered near her feet, and Cole had crossed the room in seconds to make sure she hadn't been cut, his hands gentle as he'd checked her shoes for slivers. He's protective, Luciana said, trying for casual. It's probably just how he is. Maybe. Rosie gave her a knowing look. Or maybe it's something else. Either way, you need to be careful. Men like that, when they decide they want something, they don't let go easy. The words stayed with Luciana as she drove home that night. Was that what this was? Cole deciding he wanted her? And if so, what did she want? The answer came to her on a Thursday night in late November, when the marine layer rolled in thick and cold, turning the streets into tunnels of fog that swallowed light and sound. She was closing up alone. Rosie had left early with a migraine, trusting Luciana to handle the tail end of the shift. The bar had emptied out by midnight, leaving just her and the quiet hum of the refrigerators and the jukebox playing low in the corner, some old Johnny Cash song about love and loss. She was wiping down tables when she heard the door open behind her. "We're closed," she called without turning around. "Sorry, you'll have to—" "It's me," Cole's voice. She turned to find him standing just inside the doorway, fog curling in around his boots before the door swung shut. He wasn't wearing his cut, but he looked tired, lines of tension around his eyes that hadn't been there earlier in the week. "Everything okay?" Luciana set down her rag, concern overriding caution. "Yeah. No. I don't know." He moved into the room with less than his usual grace, like the weariness had seeped into his bones. "Bad day. Needed to clear my head. Saw your car still here. So you thought you'd break into my closed bar?" The door was unlocked. A ghost of a smile. "And I'm not breaking in if you invite me, right?" She should tell him to leave, should finish closing and go home. But something in his face stopped her. A vulnerability she hadn't seen before, a crack in that armor he wore so well. "You want coffee?" she heard herself ask. "I've got a pot in the back that's probably still drinkable." "Yeah, that'd be good." In Rosie's small back office, Luciana poured 2 cups of stale coffee and added sugar to hers. Cole took his black, wrapping both hands around the mug like he was trying to absorb its warmth. They sat on opposite sides of Rosie's battered desk, the cramped space forcing an intimacy neither acknowledged. "Want to talk about it?" Luciana asked after a moment of silence. "Club business." Nothing I can really discuss. He took a sip, grimaced at the taste, but drank anyway. Just sometimes the weight of it gets heavy, you know? The responsibility. Making sure everyone stays safe, stays loyal, stays together. It's like herding wolves who all think they should be the alpha. Sounds exhausting. It is. He looked at her over the rim of his mug, and in the dim light of the office, his eyes seemed darker, more shadowed. This is going to sound stupid, but being here talking to you, it helps. You're outside all that. You don't want anything from me except maybe for me to stop taking up space at your bar. I don't mind the space you take up, Luciana admitted. And it doesn't sound stupid. Everyone needs somewhere they can just be themselves. No expectations. Is that what you think I am here, myself? I don't know. Are you? Cole was quiet for a long moment, turning the mug in his hands. Finally, he said, more than I am anywhere else. With the club, I'm sergeant at arms. I'm the enforcer, the problem solver, the guy who makes the hard calls. With you, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. With you, I'm just Cole, a guy who drinks too much whiskey and can't figure out why his heart won't behave. The vulnerability in his voice did something to Luciana's carefully maintained defenses. This wasn't the controlled biker who'd held her during the fight or the confident man who'd walked her to her car. This was someone raw, honest, struggling with the same confusion she felt. My heart doesn't behave either, she confessed quietly. Every time you walk through that door, it speeds up. Every time you look at me like you're doing right now, I forget all the reasons this is a bad idea. And when I'm not looking, his voice had dropped, become almost intimate despite the space between them. I think about when you will be. The words hung in the air, an admission that changed something fundamental between them. Cole set down his mug slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Luciana. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a promise. I'm trying to give you space, trying to let you decide what you want without pressure. But I need you to know, when I held you that night when my heart gave me away, that wasn't adrenaline. That wasn't circumstance. That was me being completely undone by you and trying like hell not to show it. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why me? You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. He stood, and the small office suddenly felt even smaller as he moved around the desk. He didn't crowd her, didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel the heat of him. I want the woman who didn't flinch when a bar fight broke out around her. I want the bartender who treats everyone with the same respect, whether they're a club member or a college kid. I want the person who looks at me like I'm more than my cut, more than my reputation, like maybe I'm someone worth knowing. Luciana's breath had gone shallow. She should stand, should move away, should maintain some distance, but she found herself rooted to the chair, looking up at him, and seeing in his face the same struggle she felt in her chest. I'm scared, she admitted. Your world. It's everything I've stayed away from. I've seen what happens when women get involved with men like you. The danger, the uncertainty, the way the club always comes first. You're right to be scared. Cole's honesty was almost brutal. The club does come first, that's the oath I took, and yeah, there's danger, there's uncertainty. I can't promise you easy or simple or safe. He crouched down then, bringing his face level with hers, and the intensity in his eyes stole what little breath she had left. But I can promise you real. I can promise that when I'm with you, I'm present, not thinking about club business or the next run or anything else. I can promise that I'll protect you with everything I have, and I can promise that what you make me feel is something I've never felt before and don't want to feel with anyone else. Cole, you don't have to decide tonight. He reached out, and this time when his fingers brushed her cheek, she didn't pull away. But I need you to know where I stand. I'm all in, Luciana. Completely, terrifyingly all in. And I'll wait as long as you need to figure out if you can be too. Then before she could respond, before she could think or second guess or do anything except feel, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was chaste, protective, nothing like the kiss she'd imagined late at night in her apartment. But it still sent electricity racing through her veins, still made her fingers curl into fists to keep from reaching for him. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with want, but his jaw was set with control. Lock the door behind me, he said, his voice rough, and get home safe. Then he was gone, the office door closing behind him, and a moment later she heard the bar's front door open and shut. The roar of his Harley split the night, then faded into the fog. Luciana sat frozen for a long moment, her heart pounding, her skin tingling where he'd touched her. Then slowly she stood and made her way back into the empty bar. She locked the front door as instructed, finished her closing routine on autopilot, and drove home through streets made dreamlike by fog and the echo of Cole's words in her head. In her apartment, she didn't turn on the lights. She just stood at the window, staring out at nothing and everything, and finally admitted the truth she'd been fighting for 2 weeks. She wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted to see what happened when they stopped dancing around each other and let whatever this was ignite into something real. But wanting and doing were two different things. The question was, which would win? December came to Ventura with rainstorms that battered the coast and turned the hills green overnight. The tourist season slowed, leaving the city to its locals, surfers braving cold water for clean swells, families preparing for holidays, and bartenders serving regulars who didn't mind the rain. Luciana hadn't seen Cole in 5 days. She'd told herself it was fine, that maybe the distance was exactly what they both needed. But every time the bar door opened, her heart jumped, and every time it wasn't him, disappointment settled like a weight in her chest. On the 5th night, Rosie cornered her during a slow moment. "You're going to wear a hole in that glass if you keep polishing it." The older woman took the glass from Luciana's hands and set it aside. "Talk to me, honey. What's going on?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar. Always have been." Rosie leaned against the bar, her expression gentle. "Is this about Maddox? He hasn't been around lately." Luciana wanted to deny it, but what was the point? "He told me he was all in. Asked me to figure out if I could be too. And then he just disappeared." "Maybe he's giving you space. You said you were scared." "I am scared. The admission came easier this time. But I'm also—" She stopped, searching for the right words. "I miss him, which is crazy because I barely know him. But I miss the way he looks at me, the way he makes me feel safe and terrified at the same time, the way my whole night feels different when he's here." Rosie nodded slowly. "Sounds like you've figured out your answer. What if it's the wrong answer? Then you deal with it, but staying stuck in maybe is worse than risking wrong." The older woman squeezed her shoulder. "For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of men come through this bar. Most of them are all talk. But Maddox? When he looks at you, it's like the rest of the world doesn't exist. That's rare. Maybe worth the risk." Before Luciana could respond, the door opened, and this time, it was Cole. He looked different, harder somehow, with tension in his shoulders and something dark in his eyes. He wore his cut tonight, the leather vest marking him as what he was: sergeant at arms, enforcer, dangerous. But when his gaze found Luciana across the bar, something in his expression softened. He moved to his usual spot and she poured him whiskey without asking. "Blanton's, the good stuff." "Long time no see," she said, sliding the glass across to him. "Been a rough week." He drank half of it in one swallow. "Club business. Had to handle some things. You okay?" "I am now." He looked at her and there was something vulnerable in his eyes despite the hard exterior. "I stayed away on purpose. Thought maybe if I gave you space, you'd figure things out without me hovering. But I've got to be honest, it's been hell. I kept finding excuses to ride past this place just to see if your car was here." Luciana's heart clenched. "I thought maybe you'd changed your mind." "Not even close." He set down his glass, his fingers drumming once against the bar before stilling. "But I needed you to come to your own decision. Not because I was there every night, wearing you down. Because you actually wanted this. Wanted me. And if I do?" The question came out steadier than she felt. "What happens then? Then we stop pretending this is going away and see where it goes. What does that look like? In practical terms?" Cole considered this and she appreciated that he didn't just give her easy answers. "It looks like me taking you to dinner somewhere that's not this bar. It looks like you meeting parts of my life, and me meeting parts of yours. It looks like us figuring out if what we feel right now is just chemistry or something that can actually build into more. And the club? The club is my life," he said bluntly. "I won't lie about that, but that doesn't mean you can't be part of it too. If you want to be." Luciana looked at him, really looked at him. At the scars on his knuckles, the lines around his eyes that spoke of hard living and harder choices. At the way he held himself, coiled and ready even now. At the patches on his cut that told stories of brotherhood and blood. This was what she'd be getting into. This life, this world, this man who was everything she'd told herself to avoid. But she was so tired of being careful, so tired of keeping herself locked away from anything that might hurt or complicate, or challenge her safe, predictable existence. "I want to be," she heard herself say, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Cole's expression transformed. The hardness melted away, replaced by something so genuine and unguarded that it took her breath away. He stood, pulled out his wallet, and laid a $100 bill on the bar. "When do you get off?" 2 hours. "I'll wait." He moved to his usual table, but this time when he sat down there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before. The next 2 hours crawled by. Luciana served drinks and made small talk and cleaned up spills, but her mind was elsewhere. On the man watching her from the corner, on the decision she'd just made, on the feeling of standing at the edge of something that would change everything. When midnight finally came and the last customers filtered out, Cole helped her close up without being asked. He washed glasses while she wiped down tables, moving around each other in the small space with an ease that felt practiced, even though it wasn't. Rosie watched them with knowing eyes but said nothing, just locked up the till and grabbed her coat. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do," she told Luciana with a wink as she headed out, which left them alone in the empty bar, the rain drumming against the windows and the neon signs casting colored shadows across the floor. "So," Luciana said, hanging up her apron, "what now?" "Now I take you somewhere." Cole held out his hand, and after only a brief hesitation, she took it. His palm was warm, calloused, and when his fingers closed around hers, she felt that now familiar spike of electricity. "Trust me? I'm working on it." He smiled, really smiled, broad and genuine. "Good enough." They walked out into the rain together. Cole's Harley was parked under the flickering streetlight, rain beating on its chrome and leather. He pulled a helmet from the saddlebag and held it out to her. "I've never ridden on a motorcycle before," Luciana admitted. "There's a first time for everything." He helped her put on the helmet, his fingers gentle as he adjusted the strap. "Just hold on to me, lean when I lean, and trust that I'm not going to let anything happen to you." Then he swung onto the bike, kicked it to life with a roar that seemed to challenge the thunder overhead, and waited for her to climb on behind him. Luciana took a breath, said a quick prayer to whoever might be listening, and got on. The moment she wrapped her arms around Cole's waist, everything else fell away. The rain, the cold, the fear, all of it became background noise. All that mattered was the solid warmth of his body against hers, the rumble of the engine beneath them, and the way his hand came down to squeeze her clasped hands once. Reassurance and promise, all at once. Then they were moving, pulling out into the empty Ventura streets, and Luciana held on tighter, her face pressed against the leather of his cut, her heart pounding in time with the engine's rhythm. Cole rode them out of the city, up into the hills above Ventura where houses gave way to open land and the lights of the valley spread out below like fallen stars. He finally stopped at an overlook she'd never been to, just a wide spot on a winding road with a view that would have been spectacular on a clear day, but was hidden now behind curtains of rain and fog. He killed the engine, and the sudden quiet was profound, broken only by rain on pavement and the distant rumble of thunder. "This is it?" Luciana asked, looking around. "A muddy overlook in the middle of a storm? This is where I come when I need to think." Cole climbed off the bike and helped her down, steadying her when she stumbled on legs still adjusting to solid ground. "Where I come when the club gets too loud and the world gets too heavy. I've never brought anyone here before." "Never?" "Never." He took off her helmet, then his own, setting them on the bike. The rain immediately soaked them both, but neither moved to find shelter. "Wanted you to see it. Wanted you to know that this, what I'm offering you, it's not just me. It's all of me. Even the quiet parts I don't show anyone else." Luciana stood in the rain looking at this man who was offering her everything he had, and felt something inside her shift and settle into place. "I'm still scared," she said honestly. "Me too." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the rain caught in his eyelashes, the way his dark hair stuck to his forehead. "I'm scared I'm going to mess this up. Scared that the club is going to come between us. Scared that you're going to realize I'm not worth the risk. Cole, but I'm more scared of not trying." His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their size and the violence she knew they were capable of. "I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what this could have been." Luciana reached up, pressing her palms against his chest, and felt it, that racing, stuttering heartbeat, that had betrayed him from the very beginning. "Your heart's doing it again," she whispered. "It does that around you. Can't seem to help it." He was so close now that his breath ghosted across her lips. "Been racing since the moment I first saw you. Haven't figured out how to make it stop. Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe not." The kiss, when it finally happened, wasn't gentle or uncertain. It was everything they'd been holding back for weeks. All the tension, all the wanting, all the fear and hope and desperate need compressed into the moment their lips met. Cole kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. His hand slid into her wet hair, angling her head so he could deepen the kiss, and Luciana responded with equal intensity, her fingers curling into his cut, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. The rain poured down around them. Thunder rolled across the valley, and they stood there, two people from different worlds, finally allowing themselves to acknowledge what had been building since the night he'd promised to just hold her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know. No going back after this. I know that too." He pulled back just enough to look at her, rain dripping from his jaw, his eyes searching hers. "You sure about this? About me? Because once we start down this road?" Luciana silenced him with another kiss, shorter, but no less intense. When she pulled back, she said, "I'm terrified, but I'm also more sure about this than I've been about anything in a long time. So yeah, I'm in. Completely, terrifyingly in." The smile that broke across Cole's face was incandescent. He pulled her close, wrapping her in arms that felt like safety and danger and home all at once, and Luciana let herself sink into the embrace, let herself finally stop fighting what she felt. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other in the rain, two heartbeats racing in tandem. This was just the beginning. Luciana knew that. There would be challenges ahead, the club, the complications of their different lives, the very real dangers that came with loving a man like Cole Maddox. But as she stood in his arms, feeling his heart pound against hers, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.